Henrik Voss had locked the doors and shuttered the windows before collapsing into bed after 3 days of riding through mountain passes to return to his homestead. And he was absolutely certain no one else had a key to his remote cabin, which made waking to the smell of porridge cooking and children's laughter all the more bewildering. He sat bolt upright in bed, his hand instinctively reaching for the knife he kept beneath his pillow. The morning light filtered through cracks in the shutters, illuminating dust motes that danced in golden beams. His heart hammered against his ribs as he heard footsteps moving across the wooden floor of his main room, accompanied by the clink of pottery and the crackle of his hearth fire. Henrik pulled on his trousers and shirt with fumbling fingers, gripping his knife as he crept toward the door of his bedroom. He had built this house with his own hands after leaving military service 5 years ago, choosing this isolated valley specifically because it offered solitude and distance from the border conflicts that had consumed a decade of his life. Intruders were not just unexpected, they were virtually impossible given the miles of wilderness between his home and the nearest settlement. He eased the door open and froze, standing at his hearth, stirring a pot of porridge with practiced efficiency, was an orc woman. Her green skin caught the firelight, turning it to burnished jade, and her muscular frame moved with surprising grace as she tasted the porridge from a wooden spoon. She wore simple traveling clothes, patched and worn, and her black hair was pulled back in a practical braid. 2 small children sat at his table, a boy and a girl, both with the same green skin and small tusks protruding from their lower lips. They could not have been more than 5 and 7 years old, and they were setting out wooden bowls with the careful concentration of children trying very hard to be helpful. "What in the name of all the gods are you doing in my house?" Henrik demanded, his voice rougher than he intended. The orc woman spun around, her hand flying to a cooking knife on the counter. Her amber eyes widened as she saw him, and for a moment they simply stared at each other in mutual shock. The children scrambled behind their mother, clinging to her legs. "Your house," she said, her voice deep and musical despite the defensive edge to it. "This house has been abandoned for weeks. The shutters were broken, the door was unlocked, and there was no food, no supplies, nothing to indicate anyone lived here." "I have been away," Henrik said slowly, forcing himself to lower his knife but not sheath it. "On business. I locked everything before I left." The orc woman's brow furrowed and she glanced toward the front door. Henrik followed her gaze and felt his stomach sink. The door hung slightly crooked on its hinges, and even from across the room he could see scratches around the lock where something had forced it open. Not her doing, he realized, but something earlier. "Bandits," she said quietly, as if reading his thoughts. "They must have come through before we arrived. When we found this place 3 days ago, it looked like it had been ransacked and abandoned months past." Henrik moved slowly toward the door, examining the damage more closely. She was right. The lock had been jimmied open with professional efficiency, and when he looked around his main room with fresh eyes, he could see the signs of hasty looting. His spare bow was gone from its hooks, along with several tools and his good winter cloak. They had taken anything portable and valuable, leaving only the heavy furniture and basic supplies. 3 days, he repeated, turning back to face the orc woman. "We arrived in the evening," she said, still holding the cooking knife but with less aggression now. "It was snowing and the children were exhausted. When I saw this place sitting empty, I thought the gods had finally shown us mercy." Her voice cracked slightly on the last word, and she cleared her throat. "I am Greta Darkwater. These are my children, Molly and Torin." The little girl peeked out from behind her mother's leg, her huge amber eyes fixed on Henrik with a mixture of curiosity and fear. The boy kept his gaze on the floor, his small hands gripping his mother's tunic. Henrik slowly sheathed his knife and held up his empty hands. Henrik Voss. This is my home, but I am not going to throw children out into the cold. He ran a hand through his hair, still trying to process the surreal nature of waking to find an orc family living in his house. Sit. Eat your porridge. Then we need to talk. Greta hesitated, searching his face for signs of deception or violence. Whatever she saw there must have reassured her, because she nodded slowly and guided her children back to the table. She served them each a bowl of porridge, using his bowls and spoons from his supplies, and Henrik bit back the instinctive protest. They were here now, and clearly desperate, and he had seen enough suffering in the border wars to know what desperation looked like on any face, human or orc. He pulled out a chair and sat across from the children, studying them as they ate with the focused intensity of the truly hungry. They were painfully thin beneath their layers of worn clothing, and both had healing bruises on their arms. Greta served herself last, a smaller portion than she had given her children, and remained standing as if ready to flee at a moment's notice. "Where is your clan?" Henrik asked quietly, knowing even as he spoke that the answer would not be simple. Greta's jaw tightened and she looked away toward the window. Gone, scattered, destroyed. She took a breath, visibly steadying herself. "We lived in the border territories in a settlement that tried to remain neutral in the conflicts between human kingdoms and orc clans. When the fighting escalated last autumn, both sides decided neutrality was the same as betrayal. The human soldiers came first, burning half our village. The orc warriors came after, killing anyone they claimed had cooperated with the humans. We fled with nothing but what we could carry." "The father?" Henrik asked, though he suspected he already knew. "Dead." The word fell like a stone. "Defending our home while we escaped." The children had stopped eating, their spoons frozen halfway to their mouths. Molly's eyes were filling with tears, and Torin had hunched his shoulders as if trying to make himself smaller. Henrik felt a familiar tightness in his chest, the same feeling he had experienced countless times during the war when he saw the collateral damage of military actions and political decisions made far from the battlefields where people actually died. "I am sorry," he said, meaning it. Greta's eyes snapped back to him, surprised and suspicious. "You are a soldier. I can see it in the way you move, the way you checked the room before you spoke. Human soldiers killed my neighbors and burned my home. Why would you be sorry?" "Because war destroys everything it touches, regardless of who wears which uniform or which clan they claim." Henrik stood and moved to the hearth, ladling himself a bowl of porridge. "I spent 10 years fighting in the border conflicts. I did things I am not proud of, saw things I wish I could forget, and eventually realized the only way to stop contributing to the cycle of violence was to walk away entirely. That is why I live here, in the middle of nowhere, trying to build something instead of destroy." He returned to the table and began eating, letting his words settle. The porridge was good, better than his own cooking, seasoned with herbs he had grown in his small garden over the summer. Greta had clearly raided his entire pantry to make this meal, but he found he did not mind as much as he should have. "We will leave today," Greta said quietly. "We have trespassed enough on your hospitality." Henrik looked at the children, at their thin faces and frightened eyes, and then out the window at the snow falling in thick, heavy flakes. Winter had arrived in earnest during his journey home, and the temperature was dropping fast. He thought about the miles of wilderness between here and the nearest town, about the predators and the cold and the very real possibility that this small family would not survive the journey. "Where will you go?" he asked. Greta's silence was answer enough. Henrik sighed, recognizing the moment for what it was, one of those crossroads where a single decision could change the course of multiple lives. He could send them away and return to his solitary existence, or he could choose something different, something more complicated and potentially dangerous, but undeniably more human. "Stay," he heard himself say, "at least through the winter. You can have my room and I will sleep out here by the fire. In the spring, we can reassess, but I will not send children out into a blizzard." Greta stared at him as if he had spoken in a foreign language. "You cannot be serious. We are orcs. You are human." "Your neighbors will—" "I do not have neighbors," Henrik interrupted. "The nearest homestead is 2 days' ride from here, and I chose this location specifically for that reason. No one will know you are here unless you want them to. Why would you do this?" Greta's voice was thick with emotion she was trying desperately to contain. "You owe us nothing. We have stolen your food, broken into your home, and now you offer us shelter. What do you want in return?" The implication behind her question hung heavy in the air, and Henrik felt a flash of anger that she would think so poorly of him, followed immediately by the sad understanding that she probably had excellent reasons for such suspicion. The border wars had not been kind to anyone, but women and children always suffered worst in such conflicts, regardless of species. "I want nothing except the knowledge that I did the right thing," Henrik said firmly, meeting her eyes so she could see the truth in his. "I have lived alone for 5 years, and I will be honest, the solitude has been both healing and suffocating. Having people here, even unexpected guests, is not entirely unwelcome. But we need rules. You do not take anything without asking first. You contribute to the household chores and help with the work around the homestead. And most importantly, you teach your children that this is a safe place, somewhere they do not have to be afraid." Molly tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mama, can we stay, please? I am so tired of walking." The little girl's plea seemed to crack something in Greta's carefully maintained composure. Her shoulders slumped, and she pulled both children against her in a fierce embrace. "We will stay," she whispered. "And we will earn our keep, I promise you that. I am a good worker, strong and capable. I can hunt, repair, build, whatever you need. Right now what I need is to finish this excellent porridge and then check on my livestock," Henrik said, deliberately lightening the mood. "I have chickens, goats, and a cow that have been tended by a neighbor boy for the past weeks, but I need to make sure they weathered my absence well. After that, we can figure out sleeping arrangements and discuss what supplies we will need to make it through the winter." The rest of that first day passed in a strange domesticity that Henrik had never experienced before. Greta proved herself as capable as she had claimed, helping him repair the damaged door lock and reinforce the shutters against the worsening storm. The children, once they relaxed enough to stop flinching at every sudden movement, revealed themselves to be curious and surprisingly helpful. Molly insisted on gathering eggs from the chickens, her small hands gentle with the birds despite their initial alarm at her green skin and unfamiliar scent. Torin helped Henrik stack firewood, working with the quiet determination of a child trying to prove his worth. By evening, the house had transformed from Henrik's solitary bachelor existence into something resembling a family home. Clothes hung drying by the fire, small shoes were lined up by the door, and the sounds of children's voices filled spaces that had been silent for years. Henrik found himself both exhausted by the sudden change and oddly comforted by it. They ate dinner together, a simple stew made from vegetables stored in Henrik's root cellar and a bit of salt pork. Greta had insisted on cooking again, and Henrik was not about to argue given that her skills far exceeded his own. The children began to open up over the meal, Molly chattering about the chickens and Torrin shyly asking Henrik about the bow hanging above the mantel. "I was a marksman in the army," Henrik explained, taking down the weapon to show the boy. "This bow has been with me for 15 years. It has saved my life more times than I can count." "Can you teach me?" Torrin asked, his eyes wide with hope. Greta tensed, but Henrik nodded slowly. "When you are older, and if your mother approves, yes. Every person living on the frontier should know how to hunt and defend themselves." As night fell and the children grew drowsy, Greta shepherded them into Henrik's bedroom. He heard her soft voice through the door, singing a lullaby in the Orcish language, the guttural syllables somehow made beautiful by her gentle tone. When she emerged, she looked exhausted in a way that went beyond physical tiredness. "They have not felt safe enough to sleep properly in months," she said quietly, settling onto the bench near the fire where Henrik was arranging blankets for himself. "Thank you for giving them this, even if it is only temporary." "It does not have to be temporary," Henrik said, surprising himself with the words. Greta studied him in the firelight, her amber eyes reflecting the dancing flames. "You are not what I expected when I heard footsteps this morning. I thought you would be like the others, full of hate and fear." "I have plenty of both," Henrik admitted, "but most of it is directed at myself and the choices I made before I knew better. The war taught me that orcs and humans bleed the same color, cry the same tears, and love our children with the same desperate ferocity. After you learn that lesson enough times, it becomes hard to maintain the illusion that we are so different." "Most humans never learn that lesson at all," Greta said softly. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the wind howl outside and the fire crackle in the hearth. Henrik found himself studying Greta in the flickering light, noticing details he had missed in the chaos of the morning. The way her strong features softened when she thought about her children. The calluses on her hands that spoke of hard labor and harder times. The proud set of her shoulders despite everything she had lost. "Tell me about your husband," Henrik said gently. "If you want to." Greta's expression flickered through several emotions before settling on a sad sort of fondness. "Dern was a good man, strong, kind, patient with the children. He was a carpenter, built half the homes in our settlement with his own hands. When the soldiers came, he held them off long enough for us to escape through the back of the village. I heard the crossbow bolts hit him as we ran." She wiped at her eyes roughly. "I did not even get to say goodbye, did not get to tell him one last time that I loved him." Henrik felt the familiar weight of survivor's guilt, the same burden he had carried for every soldier he had failed to save during the war. He died protecting what he loved most. That is not a small thing. "No," Greta agreed, "but it does not make the loss any easier to bear." The winter days developed a rhythm that surprised Henrik with its naturalness. He woke before dawn to tend the animals, returning to find Greta already preparing breakfast and the children beginning their daily chores. They split the work of the homestead between them, Greta handling most of the cooking and repair work while Henrik hunted and managed the heavier outdoor labor. The children helped where they could, Molly's cheerful chatter and Torrin's serious questions becoming a constant soundtrack to their days. As weeks passed, Henrik watched Greta and her children slowly shed the hypervigilance of refugees and begin to relax into the safety of the homestead. Molly's laugh came more easily, and Torrin started to smile when Henrik praised his work. Greta herself seemed to unfold like a flower finally receiving sunlight, her natural warmth and humor emerging from beneath the armor of survival mode. Henrik found himself looking forward to mealtimes and evenings by the fire, when they would talk about anything and everything. Greta told him about orc culture, about the clan structures and traditions that varied so widely across different regions. Henrik shared stories from his years of wandering after the war, the strange people and places he had encountered while searching for somewhere to call home. One evening in late winter, as a particularly fierce storm battered the cabin, Molly crawled into Henrik's lap during story time. He froze, uncertain what to do, but the little girl simply settled against his chest and looked up at him with complete trust. "Tell us about the silver deer," she demanded, referring to a story he had told a few nights before about a legendary creature said to grant wishes. Henrik glanced at Greta, who was watching them with an expression he could not quite read. She nodded slightly, and he relaxed, wrapping an arm around Molly's small frame and launching into the tale. Torin leaned against his other side, and for a moment Henrik felt a profound sense of rightness that terrified him with its intensity. This was not supposed to happen. They were supposed to be temporary guests, a brief interruption in his solitary life. But somewhere between that first morning and now, they had become something more, something dangerously close to a family. After the children were in bed, Greta poured them each a cup of the pine needle tea she had taught him to make. She settled onto the bench beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "They have grown attached to you," she said quietly. "I've grown attached to them," Henrik admitted. "To all of you, if I am being honest." Greta turned to look at him, and the air between them suddenly felt charged with unspoken possibilities. "Henrik, what are we doing here? This was supposed to be temporary, a winter shelter and nothing more. But it has started to feel like something else, and I am afraid to name it in case naming it breaks the spell." Henrik set down his tea and turned to face her fully. "I think we are building a life, Greta. Against all logic and social conventions and probably common sense, we are becoming a family. And I know that is complicated and potentially dangerous and certainly unconventional, but I have not been this content in years, maybe ever." "I am an orc," Greta said, her voice trembling slightly. "You are human. There are people who would kill us both for even suggesting what you are suggesting. And my children, they would be caught in the middle of it all. We are alone out here," Henrik countered, "miles from anyone who might care. And in the spring, if you want to leave, if you want to find an orc settlement where you will be safe among your own kind, I will help you get there and supply you for the journey. But if you want to stay, if you think this could be something real and lasting, then I am willing to try. Not just for the winter, but for however long we have." Greta's eyes searched his face, looking for doubt or deception. "Why? Why would you want this? You could find a nice human woman in town, have a normal life without all the complications we bring." "I do not want normal," Henrik said firmly. "I tried normal, tried following all the rules and doing what was expected of me, and it led me to a decade of war and killing and nightmares. This, what we have built here, is the first thing that has felt genuinely good and right in my entire adult life. Your children have brought joy back into a house that was more tomb than home. You have made me remember what it feels like to care about someone other than myself. That is not something I am willing to give up without a fight." Tears were streaming down Greta's green cheeks now, and she reached up to touch his face with a trembling hand. "I am afraid," she whispered. "Afraid to hope, afraid to trust that this can last, afraid that I am being selfish by wanting this when I should be thinking only of my children's safety." Henrik covered her hand with his own. "Your children are safer here than they would be wandering the wilderness or living in a settlement that might be attacked again. And you deserve happiness too, Greta. You deserve to be more than just a mother and a survivor. You deserve to be loved." The word hung between them, finally spoken aloud, and Greta let out a sound that was half laugh and half sob. "You love me. A scarred orc widow with 2 children and more trauma than any one person should carry. I love you," Henrik confirmed, feeling the truth of it resonate through his chest. I love your strength and your gentleness, the way you sing to your children and the way you laugh at my terrible jokes. I love that you see the world clearly, without illusions, and still choose kindness. I love the life we have built together, and I want to keep building it, if you will have me." Greta leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his, a gesture of intimacy that he had learned was significant in Orc culture. "I love you too," she breathed. "I have tried to keep my distance and remember that this was temporary, but my heart does not listen to logic. You have given us safety and kindness when we had nothing, and you have never asked for anything in return except honesty and effort. How could I not love you?" Henrik closed the small distance between them and kissed her gently, mindful of her tusks and the newness of this physical intimacy between them. Greta responded with a soft sound of surprise and pleasure, her arms wrapping around his neck as the kiss deepened. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless and smiling. "So we are doing this?" Greta asked. "Building a life together, consequences be damned, Henrik agreed. They sat together by the fire long into the night, making plans and discussing logistics with the practicality of two people who had survived too much to be naive about the challenges ahead. They would need to be careful about trips to town, would need to prepare explanations if anyone ever visited unexpectedly. But out here, in their isolated valley, they could create their own rules and build their own family without the judgment and hatred of the outside world. Spring arrived with a rush of melting snow and returning birds. The valley transformed from white silence to green abundance, and Henrik taught Torin and Molly how to plant the kitchen garden and tend the growing things. Greta repaired the chicken coop and expanded it, her skills as a builder evident in every careful joint and sturdy post. Together, they worked to improve the homestead, adding a second small bedroom for the children and reinforcing the barn for additional livestock. On a warm day in late spring, Henrik rode to the distant town to trade furs and buy supplies. While there, he visited the small chapel and spoke with the elderly priest, a man who had known Henrik since he first settled in the valley. "I need you to perform a marriage," Henrik said without preamble. The priest raised his eyebrows. "Finally found yourself a wife. Good for you, boy. When should I come out to your place?" "There is a complication," Henrik admitted. "She is an orc, a widow with 2 children. We have been living together through the winter, and I want to make it official. Make sure she and the children are protected if anything happens to me." The priest's expression cycled through shock, concern, and finally a sort of resigned compassion. "Henrik, you know what you are asking is problematic. The church does not officially recognize unions between humans and orcs, and if word gets out there could be trouble for both of you." "Then we will keep it quiet," Henrik said firmly. "Just you, me, her, and the children. No record in the official books if that is what it takes, but I want vows spoken before the gods and a witness, even if that witness can never tell anyone what he saw." The priest studied him for a long moment. "You are serious about this woman. This is not some passing fancy or pity." "I love her," Henrik said simply. "And I love her children. They are my family now, and I want to protect them in every way possible, including legally, even if that law is never recognized beyond these mountains." The old priest sighed. "You always were stubborn. Very well. I will come to your homestead in 3 days' time. But Henrik, be careful. The world is not kind to those who defy its conventions." "The world has never been particularly kind to me anyway," Henrik replied with a slight smile. "I might as well defy it for something worthwhile." 3 days later, the priest arrived at the homestead in the early morning. Greta had spent the previous day in a state of nervous excitement, cleaning the already spotless cabin and preparing a feast, despite Henrik's assurances that simplicity was fine. The children had been dressed in their best clothes, which Greta had carefully mended and let out to accommodate their growth over the winter. They gathered in the main room, the morning light streaming through the windows and illuminating the simple space. The priest kept his expression carefully neutral as he took in Greta's green skin and tusks, but his voice was warm and professional as he began the ceremony. Marriage is a covenant between two souls who choose to walk life's path together, the priest intoned. It is a promise of support in times of hardship, celebration in times of joy, and unwavering commitment through all the seasons of life. Henrik Voss, do you take Greta Darkwater as your wife, to honor and protect, to cherish and respect, for as long as you both shall live? I do, Henrik said clearly, holding Greta's hands and looking into her amber eyes. Greta Darkwater, do you take Henrik Voss as your husband, to honor and protect, to cherish and respect, for as long as you both shall live? I do, Greta said, her voice strong despite the tears streaming down her face. Then, by the power vested in me by the gods and the church, I declare you married in spirit and commitment, if not in the eyes of those who would judge you unfairly. May your union be blessed with love, prosperity, and peace. Henrik pulled Greta into a kiss as Molly and Torin cheered, the children delighted to see their mother so happy. The priest blessed them all and shared the wedding feast Greta had prepared, listening to the children's excited chatter about the farm and the animals and their plans for the summer garden. Before he left, he pulled Henrik aside. You have built something good here, the priest said quietly. Something rare and precious. Protect it fiercely, and may the gods watch over you all. As summer progressed, their little family flourished. The garden produced abundant vegetables, the chickens laid eggs reliably, and Henrik brought home game from his hunting expeditions. Greta taught the children to read using an old book of stories Henrik had owned. Her patience and creativity as a teacher evident in how quickly they progressed. Torin showed an aptitude for archery, and Henrik began training him properly, teaching him not just how to shoot but the responsibility that came with such skills. Molly discovered a talent for working with the animals, her gentle nature putting even the most skittish creatures at ease. She spent hours in the barn, talking to the goats and braiding flowers into the cow's mane, her laughter a constant source of joy. One evening in late summer, as they all sat on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains, Molly leaned against Henrik and asked the question he had been wondering if she would ever voice. Henrik, can we call you Papa? Torin and I talked about it, and we know you are not our first Papa, and we still love him and miss him. But you are our Papa now, the one who takes care of us and teaches us things and makes Mama smile again. Is that okay? Henrik felt his throat tighten with emotion, and he looked at Greta, who was crying silent tears. She nodded encouragingly. I would be honored, Henrik said, his voice rough. Your first Papa was a brave man who loved you very much, and I promise to always make sure you remember him. But yes, I will be your Papa now, and I will do everything in my power to keep you safe and happy. Both children hugged him fiercely, and Greta joined them, the four of them wrapped together as the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky. As autumn painted the valley in shades of gold and crimson, they worked together to prepare for the coming winter. The root cellar was stocked with preserved vegetables, the barn was filled with hay for the animals, and firewood was stacked high against the cabin walls. They had become an efficient team, each knowing their role and working in harmony with the others. On the first anniversary of the morning, Henrik had woken to find his house occupied by unexpected guests. They celebrated with a special dinner and reflection on how far they had come. The children were healthy and happy, confident in ways they had not been when they first arrived. Greta had blossomed into a version of herself that she had forgotten existed. The trauma of losing her first husband and her home still present, but no longer defining every moment of her existence. Henrik himself had discovered that the solitude he thought he needed had actually been slowly killing him, that humans were not meant to live in isolation, but in connection with others. His nightmares from the war had not disappeared, but they came less frequently now, and when they did, Greta was there to hold him until the memories faded. "I have been thinking," Greta said as they lay in bed that night, her head resting on Henrik's chest. "About the future, about what happens as the children grow older and eventually need more than just us and this valley." "I have been thinking about that too," Henrik admitted. "We cannot keep them isolated forever. Eventually they will want to see more of the world, meet other people." "What if we work to create more places like this?" Greta suggested. "Safe havens where mixed families like ours could exist without fear. We know we cannot be the only human and orc who have fallen in love, who want to build a life together despite the prejudice. If we could connect with others, create a network of support, maybe we could start to change the larger world by creating pockets of acceptance within it." Henrik considered this, turning the idea over in his mind. It was ambitious and potentially dangerous, but it also felt right in a way that resonated deep in his chest. It would take time and careful planning. We would need to find others who think like we do, build trust slowly. "We have time," Greta said. "And we have proven that it is possible to build a family across the divide of species and prejudice. That is a powerful example, if we choose to share it." They talked late into the night, making plans and dreaming of a future where their children could walk openly in the world without fear, where love was not constrained by the color of one's skin or the shape of one's tusks. It was an ambitious dream, perhaps even an impossible one, but they had already accomplished the impossible simply by choosing to love each other. In the years that followed, their homestead became known in whispered conversations among those who needed refuge, a place where the old hatreds held no power and family was defined by choice rather than blood. Other mixed couples found their way to the valley, some staying temporarily and others settling nearby to build their own homes. Slowly, carefully, a small community formed, one built on the principles of acceptance and mutual support. Henrik and Greta watched their children grow into strong, capable young people who moved easily between human and orc cultures, comfortable in their mixed heritage and confident in the love that had created their family. Torin became a skilled hunter and teacher, passing on the lessons Henrik had taught him to the younger children who arrived at the settlement. Molly developed a reputation as an animal healer, her gentle touch and intuitive understanding of creatures' needs making her invaluable to the growing community. On a spring morning many years after that first unexpected meeting, Henrik and Greta sat on their porch watching the valley come alive with activity. Children played in the meadow, a mix of human and orc and everything in between. Smoke rose from a dozen chimneys scattered across the valley, each marking a home where love had proven stronger than prejudice. The community they had helped create was still small and still vulnerable, but it existed, a living testament to the possibility of change. "You ever regret it?" Greta asked, her hand finding Henrik's and squeezing gently. "Taking in 3 refugees and changing your entire life?" Henrik thought about the question seriously, running through all the challenges and dangers they had faced, the sacrifices they had made, the constant vigilance required to protect their family and community. Then he thought about the sound of Molly's laugh, the proud look on Torin's face when he made a difficult shot, the feeling of Greta's hand in his and the life they had built together. "Not for a single moment," he said firmly. That morning when I woke to find you in my house, stirring porridge and taking care of your children despite having nothing, that was the morning my real life began. Everything before was just preparation for finding you, for building this family, for creating something meaningful out of all the destruction I had witnessed and participated in during the war. Greta leaned her head against his shoulder, her tusks pressing gently against his collarbone in a gesture that had become intimately familiar over the years. I love you, Henrik Voss. Thank you for seeing past the prejudice to the person underneath, for giving us a home when we had nowhere else to go, for being the partner and father we needed. I love you too, Greta Voss, Henrik replied, using the surname she had taken as her own after their wedding. Thank you for barging into my life uninvited and refusing to leave, for teaching me that family is built through choice and commitment rather than blood, for showing me that love is always worth the risk. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching their community thrive and their children flourish, knowing that the path ahead would still hold challenges but confident in their ability to face them together. The house that Henrik had built as a refuge from the world had become something far greater, a home filled with love and laughter, a sanctuary not just for one man's solitude, but for a family that had chosen each other against all odds and built something beautiful from that choice. In the end, Henrik reflected, the best things in life were the ones you never planned for, the unexpected gifts that arrived when you were least prepared but most in need. He had gone to bed alone that night so many years ago, a solitary man in a solitary house, and woken to find his future waiting for him in the form of an orc woman and 2 children who would become the center of his world. It was not the life he had imagined for himself, but it was the life he was grateful to be living, surrounded by love and purpose and the daily miracle of a family that should not exist according to the prejudices of the world, but existed nonetheless, thriving in their hidden valley and proving every day that love could indeed conquer all.